House Oversight Chair Darrell Issa joins us. Nice to see you, Chairman.
Well, thanks for having me on, and thanks for covering this important hearing today.
Well, a lot happened today. In fact, the big news today, of course, was the president asserting the executive privilege. This is an 18-month-long investigation. When did you first hear that he was going to, or get wind of the fact that he's going to assert this?
About 9:50 this morning, with a 10 o'clock markup, we received an 8-page report. Theoretically, that 8 pages was entirely done after we had a meeting that went till about 6 o'clock the previous evening, in which Attorney General Holder offered only to brief us on remaining information and then give us documents supporting that if we canceled our investigation or specifically considered all subpoenas as met.
All right, now you've asked for a number of documents. He was offering 1,300 pages?
He described it as 1,300 pages and told us that some of those pages we'd never asked for, but he thought we should have them.
All right, so you weren't even necessarily getting the pages that you wanted. If that may be the Attorney General with...
If it's Brock, I'll tell him we're not available.
Maybe the Attorney General he's going to answer your subpoena. All right, if the 1,300 pages, though, those aren't even necessarily the pages that you had specifically asked for. Those are pages he thought you should have and weren't really an answer to the subpoena, right?
Well, exactly. We were asked for, to take a pig in the poke. We were asked to take some assertion that these documents would be meaningful without seeing them, without looking at them, and without a log of anything they weren't giving us. I think they knew we couldn't accept that. Brian Terry's family couldn't accept it. The American people couldn't accept it.
What's your theory as to why the president invoked executive privilege, and why now? Because this has been going on for a long time.
Well, you're exactly right. This is an 11th hour stunt, potentially, but taking that it's serious, he's seriously trying to create an executive privilege that either doesn't exist or has been loosely held, meaning most of these documents that we've asked for clearly are within the Justice Department. They're not between the president. So his assertion is about, well, for example, the ATF director sending an email that we've asked for in which he says, hey, we got to stop this gun walking. I've read the wiretaps. This is terrible. We have a sworn statement bipartisan statement by the former ATF director that he sent it, but he doesn't have a copy of it. That wasn't directed to the president, and yet they're asserting executive privilege as to that. I
don't understand this, and you and I have talked many times about this, and we've been covering for a long time, but it seems to me the questions are quite simple. Who authorized Fast and Furious? Have you ever asked that and you've ever gotten the answer on that?
We've asked, and we have not gotten answers.
Because that's a pretty simple one. Yes. I would think, because somebody had to authorize it. The second one, what I'd want to know is who is the highest person in government that was aware of Fast and Furious?
Well, and that's an area where when we read the wiretaps, we think it goes to Jason Weinstein, to Grindler, and to Lanny Brewer at a minimum. Our Democratic colleagues, when they read it, say, well, they didn't read these documents, so even though they were responsible for them, we don't see how you can feel that they knew about them.
Do you have any reason to believe the White House was aware, by the White House I mean anybody who works in the White House, was aware of Fast and Furious while it was still an active operation? And secondly, are you aware of anyone suspicious, anybody at the White House was aware of the effort to sort of make this a very long and dragged-out investigation so far?
Well, the first part of your question, we've never thought that this was something directed from the White House. We thought it was and is a failed strategy done at a local level for which the OCDEF, this team that comprised of many agencies, got its authorization and money through justice with authorization all the way to Washington. There's no logical reason that before Brian Terry was killed that this would have come to the attention of the president. But clearly, we're questioning whether afterwards, during this cover-up, the false statement made on February 4th of last year, and the months before they finally admitted that they had been untruthful to Congress, we do question whether or not there was communication with people, including the White House.
Well, the Attorney General has issued a statement tonight about almost 5 o'clock tonight. It says, in part, it says, simply put, any claims that the Justice Department has been unresponsive to requests for information are untrue. From the beginning, Chairman Issa and certain members of the committee have made unsubstantiated allegations first, then scrambled for facts to try to justify them later. That might make for good political theater, but does little to uncover the truth or address the problems associated with this operation and prior ones dating back to the previous administration.
Well, he's always wanted to talk about the previous administration and a different failed program. We've never tried to pretend that it wasn't a different failed program. And we're not happy with the Bush administration activities either. But in the case of Fast and Furious, where Brian Terry's guns came from, we first became aware of this when a whistleblower went to Senator Grassley. Senator Grassley asked questions and was told he wouldn't get answers. We asked questions and we got denials, an actual false letter and false testimony. So yes, there were times in which we had whistleblowers who said certain things, and all we had was a whistleblower's word. But as documents came in almost every case, the whistleblowers were telling the truth, and justice was shading the truth or perhaps not telling the truth.
The contempt resolution came out of your committee today. It now goes to the floor for a vote, right?
Yes.
Have you spoken to Speaker Boehner to find out when that vote will be? I mean, is he willing to put it on the floor for a vote?
Well, before I even left the hearing room, Speaker Boehner had announced the vote would be next week. I haven't met with the staff because, quite frankly, I got pretty busy, including meeting with my staff so that we could prepare for that, because we've got a lot of work to do. As you know, when the President asserted in the executive order, we prepared and amended our resolution, so that has been changed, but we want to make sure that it's accurate when we go to the floor, and if there's any further amendments, we would do that. It
seems to me that in asserting executive privilege, it's done for one of two reasons. One is a good faith belief that it's important to assert, that the facts warrant it, and that's important to preserve the sanctity of the executive branch. The other option is something more sinister, that someone's trying to hide something, prevent something from going forward. Which is it in this instance, do you think?
Well, I mean, there's two prior examples. In the Harriet Miers case, President Bush asserted executive privilege as to communications back and forth between his key counsels and himself. I think that was appropriate. In the case of Republican, in the case of Richard Nixon, he asserted executive privilege and that anything the president said was legal, and so on. And of course, ultimately, everything, including correspondence that went back and forth to President Nixon, in other words, the cover-up, was held not to be within executive privilege. So I think we have one case in which a president did wrong and it was wrong. You have another case in which
So what's the motive here? Is it because it's legitimate exercise of presidential power and it warrants, we have a difference of opinion, but it's executive privilege, or it's a cover-up and something to obstruct?
Well, I can tell you that Eric Holder told me just last night that, and he said it before, that many of these documents he was willing to have us obtain if we agreed to settle the case would be very embarrassing, but he would do it anyway. And it's one of the areas that concerns us is, look, we're not looking to embarrass him, but just because something's embarrassing doesn't mean it's not responsive.
So which is it?
Well, look, we think the documents are embarrassing. We think that there were months of people saying you got to quit lying, you got to come forward with the truth. You had attorneys who knew that false testimony had been made to Congress, they're officers of the court, and they did not come forward to us. They lobbied with injustice to come out with the truth. 10 months later, when they came out with the truth, all that deliberative activity in this case is very appropriate for us to see.
So is it obstruction or legitimate?
You know, that's a tough one, Greta, and I think the Court of Public Opinion will decide on both of our fates on that. We think we did today what we were obligated to do. We will continue with our investigation, and dozens of other investigations we're obligated to do. We'd like to see this ended because the resources we're using should be going after waste, fraud, and abuse if we could bring this to a close.
Well, we'll see what happens next week. Next week's a long time away, a lot of time. Anyway, Congressman, thank you.
Greta.
Nice to see you.